What if your biggest setbacks were actually the key to your next breakthrough?
A setback is defined as a reversal in progress.
Meet Amy Shoenthal, award-winning journalist, Forbes contributor, and author of The Setback Cycle. She's spent years studying how successful people turn failure into fuel. And in this episode, she's sharing how you can do the same.
I just noticed that these great ideas came after people went through something generally unpleasant.
But it's not just about bouncing back. It's about rewriting your own story.
I don't have any clients yet, but I will.
Amy breaks down how to reintroduce yourself beyond just a job title.
If you just talk about what you do or what you're most proud of, that can lead to so many opportunities.
Why setbacks force us to reflect on what truly energizes us.
Every day, rate your motivation, rate your energy, and write what am I energized by and what am I disengaged with. There's all these things I've discovered about how freeing it is in ways I really never could have imagined.
And how a simple habit, just 15 minutes a day, helped her write a book while balancing a full-time job and motherhood.
The way I wrote my book while holding down a full-time job and being a mother to a toddler was I dedicated 15 minutes a day.
If you've ever felt stuck, uncertain, or wondering what's next, this conversation is for you.
That you create a life that your career is part of, but your whole life is not your career. I think that's really the future of work.
This is Escape 9 to 5 with Amy Shoenthal.
Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I'm so happy that I actually got you today. So for my podcast name, as the name suggested, it's Escape 9 to 5. I usually want to interview people who has escaped their 9 to 5 journey and embark with their own adventure, which is exactly what you are embody. And I listened to your TEDx talk that was featured in TED Talks Daily. That feels like a gift to me from the universe, because as someone who has navigated setbacks so many times in my life, I was like, I haven't even finished that TED Talk. I need to send her an email. So thank you so much for
thank you so much. Yes, we've all navigated setbacks. It is a universal experience.
Yeah. So for people who doesn't know your work, how would you describe what you are working on? What are you passionate about?
By training, I'm a journalist, which means I write about topics and then I dig deep and explore them by telling stories of people and interviewing experts to back up those stories. So any story I tell will be backed up with stats and interesting information that really rounds out the story. And when I wrote the Setback Cycle, I noticed that happened because I noticed in all of my articles that I needed to explore this concept much further. There was much more going on here, and it really hadn't been explored in a big way.
We talked about the setback cycle in a bit. Usually when I start the podcast, I will ask my guests to share 2 truths and a lie, their escape 9 to 5 version with me. So I'd be able to guess which one is the lie. Can you share 3 statements?
Okay, 2 truths and a lie. So the 3 statements I'm going to share is, like any good journalist, I built a career as a marketing consultant. Now I travel all over the country, all over the world, doing talks about leadership, trends, and themes. And the 3rd thing is, when I had my child, it really helped my career and gave me a great reputation at work.
Yeah, I think that's an easy one for me because I'm almost finished. I'm on chapter 8 of your setback.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so you know which is the lie.
Yeah, so I know which one is the lie, which is the 3rd one. Also, you have mentioned it in the TED Talk.
I wish it was the truth. And I will say that the truth is it did propel me to an incredible career, something that is way beyond my wildest dreams, but in immediate return after having my child, it was not great for my career. So
yeah, so let's dive into that. Like, what pivoted you from your traditional marketing agency career to now you have your own LLC, you travel around the world, talk to leaders and founders and doing something you're passionate about. How did that come about? Just to tell us.
Well, I had a wonderful marketing career for I still do. For 20 years, I was in the agency world and I was working on really big consumer brands and tech brands. And I took a lot of pride in my work. I built a pretty good reputation. I was a pretty senior leader at the last agency I worked at. But I also knew the realities of not only becoming a mother, but becoming a woman over 40 in the marketing agency world. There's not a lot of people once you get to a senior role. Like the jobs are just fewer, right? And these things were all like happening at the same time. I saw that there wasn't a guaranteed future in this world. And when I came back from maternity leave, it was even worse than I had thought it would be because I was removed from accounts that I had spent years building. There's a lot of nuance to that story. It wasn't like good and evil. It wasn't like people were malicious and just mad that I had a kid and took me off accounts. It's not what happened, right? Everyone was making the best decisions that they could and trying to just like do what was best in that moment for the people who had replaced me, to give them opportunities, for the businesses that I had been absent from for 3 months. It's complicated, right? But that doesn't change what happened to me, which was I was removed from the responsibilities that I had once enjoyed. And those responsibilities are what gave me so much pride in my work. And once I didn't have as much to do, and I knew what the future of marketing held for parents, especially moms, and even women over 40. And I said, I better like start to build my backup plan because I know where this is going, And so I started consulting on the side. I started really going to my network and talking to as many people as I could and talking to them about what I was good at. And I started a small, like, ghostwriting thought leadership practice on the side, which was very easy for me to do. As a journalist, as a storyteller, I'm very good at helping people tell their stories, and I'm very good at writing in the voice of other people. You do this as a marketer, you write in the voice of brands, right? You make marketing collateral that's not in your own voice, it's in the voice of someone else or, an entity. And so I started doing this for people. What I did for big brands, I just did for people. And I started to elevate their thought leadership within whatever industry they were either entering or a part of and just wanted more visibility in. Once I started doing this, turned out I was really good at it.
Yeah.
And one person recommended me to another, to another, to another. And all of a sudden I had like 3 ongoing clients on the side of my agency job. And so I existed in this in between for years, right? I found my way back at the agency job. Like I got a couple promotions, like I was doing okay. Like I found my way back, but I never really rebuilt from, that back that I had been given. And how I rebuilt in the real way is I built this side consulting business. And then inevitably, when I was laid off many years later, as part of like a really big sort of staff reduction effort, I had my LLC already formed. I had this reputation among founders and leaders, and they knew that like they could come to me and I could help elevate them in their industry by, again, ghostwriting LinkedIn posts and op-eds and just giving them a strategy of how to better position themselves and talk about themselves more strategically. So I was pretty set up for my own consulting gig. I wasn't sure if I would do that full time or if I would get another job. And I was kind of looking into both. But once I told people that I was more available and I didn't have to set limits on who I could work with or what I could do, I mean, the business just kind of started accumulating. And now I have a full-time workload, and between the thought leadership, the marketing consulting, the speaking, I speak at a lot of companies now about leadership trends and how teams can work through setbacks. And I give workshops. And so between those 3 pieces, I have a pretty respectable business that I've put together over the past few years.
This is interesting because most of the people, for my theme exactly is those people, like I was laid off twice. So I was like, this is it. I'm just going to do my own business.
A lot of people have been laid off at some point, especially now.
Especially now. But then most of the people I interviewed, they wouldn't be as happy as you are. I think in your book, you wrote very in detail how happy you are on the day you got laid off. And that's actually happening 48 hours after submitting your manuscript, right? Like
it was so funny. Yeah, I submitted the manuscript. I'd been working on this book for years, and it was about the setbacks of other people, right? Because I worked at this company and I was like, I'm not going to talk about my own setback because I work here and I don't want to piss anyone off. And then I handed in the manuscript And then I was laid off and I went to my editor and I said, can I have it back real quick? I have like more I can write now. I am not as confined as I once was. And I can really share my story much more honestly, because I'm not like muzzled because I
Mhm.
don't work in the corporate world anymore. And so
Yeah.
let's go. Obviously I'm going to be as respectful as possible, but I'm going to tell the truth. And
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
very freeing.
You feel very liberating, I think, in my process at least. I think people take away my God, whatever card that I need to get access to the building. I was like, great. Now I don't need to reply all of those emails. And
It's amazing. And I like,
yeah,
obviously I have clients now and it's not like I am beholden to those clients. I need to do really good work and make them happy, but I also can kind of set my own hours. Like I really try to log off at 4 every day. And
cool.
that's not a luxury I had when I was in the corporate world. You're even if you don't have any more work to do, like I felt as a manager, like I had to be available on Slack, on email. If
Yeah.
the people who reported to me needed me, I needed to be there for them. I needed to respond. It's a big responsibility and I wanted to be there for them, but it also really like tethered me to my laptop until
Yeah.
6 p.m. every day. And now knowing that I can get my work done and like leave the house at 4 p.m. and just like go pick up my kid, it's like, it's amazing. I
Yeah.
got into cooking because I realized that I always said, oh, I hate cooking. I'm not into it. That's because when you start at 6 p.m., it's like a rush. It's frantic. If you start at like 5:30, 5:30 and you like go slowly, it can actually be quite enjoyable. So there's
Yeah.
all these things I've discovered about how freeing it is in ways I really like never could have imagined.
Yeah, speaking of how freeing it is, I love the concept that you wrote about it in the book, the last name syndrome. I never really thought about it in that way, but it actually resonates so much. Like usually we talk about someone, let's say Cindy from Morgan Stanley or Amy from the marketing agency, Lydia from
Yes.
whatever bank. And now because you are one of those people who are you own your own brand, you're just
I'm
like
just Amy Shoenthal. I know. Like my company is called Visionaries Collective because I wanted to like I work with visionaries and I help them clarify their vision. And it's a collective because I bring in other people to collaborate with, but almost nobody really knows that. Like I am not known as Amy from Visionaries Collective. I'm
yeah,
Amy. Like when people all of my clients have come through referrals and they're all saying like, "Oh, you got to talk to Amy. Oh, she did my strategic narrative and she really helped me clarify my areas of focus. So I became this thought leader and I established my credibility. You got to go talk to her. She can do that for you. Like, it's just me, it's my name. And it's also a really big motivator to do amazing work
yes.
because that's you, that's your reputation. And
Whether
so
it's good or bad, it's you. Yes.
it's more rewarding. It's definitely more pressure, but it's more rewarding. And you just take so much more pride in your work now.
I don't know when did you realize that you're breaking away from the last name of the company? How do you think that people can consciously break free from that mindset even though they are still in a major corporation?
I think they have to start introducing themselves differently. So if you're, hi, I'm Amy, I work at Microsoft, I'm a sales representative from Microsoft, that's not, that should not be your intro anymore. See what
Mhm.
else you can say. Hi, I'm Amy. I spend my time helping people, increase their sales,
Yeah.
right? Oh, I'm Amy. I manage this team and we're working through some challenges right now and I'm trying to help them. Like you're talking about, actually, you're giving more concrete examples of what you do in a way that a title and a company cannot, because
Yes.
and the advantage of doing that is you never know who is in the room. And if you say something like that, like I'll tell you, I'm not going to say, hey, I'm a marketing consultant. I say, I'm positioning thought leaders so that they can establish their credibility in their industry. You kind of know what that means a little bit more than if I say I'm a marketing consultant. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And if you just talk about what you do or what you're most proud of,
Uh-huh.
that can lead to so many opportunities because not only will it potentially set the stage for your next chapter, it could lead to areas of passion outside of work. Like just because you introduce yourself in this way and get away from last name syndrome, it doesn't mean you're looking for a new job. You might not
Yeah.
be ready for that, and that's okay.
Mhm.
But you never know what opportunities are unearthed or what people you can help you by saying what you actually do in a concrete way.
Yeah, now it all makes sense. I remember I was trying to not introduce myself as a banker, not even last name syndrome, because some people have bad impression of that industry. When I was working in my last team, our team helped climate technology companies to raise money. So usually when I, even within the bank, I would introduce myself. I'd say, I help companies who's changing the world to
Yeah.
get the money they need.
That's
And it actually helps so much when even I left the job, I wasn't feeling a sense of like lost that
yeah.
much. Same way that I did the first time I got laid off.
Did you, but and you introduced yourself by saying like what you did at the bank, even though it wasn't necessarily like I am a banker,
Yeah,
because
no. I try not to say I am a
yeah,
banker. I usually wouldn't say it unless people
exactly.
really press me. So like, what does that mean?
And that's
If,
fine. Like that's
yeah,
fine. Obviously, if you get to a point in the conversation, you could say where you work. It's more challenging because we're not conditioned to talk like this. But once you really get your speech down, it's more impactful, right? You're going to have a better conversation with that person by saying what you
yeah.
actually do.
Yeah, and then people are usually more interested in that. I would be like, all
Exactly.
these companies, they're trying to clean up
Yeah,
the atmosphere. They're trying to provide new renewable
exactly.
energy sources, and it's a much better conversation opener. I was like, there's good bankers out there, so I'm one of those.
Exactly. Oh, that's so true.
Yeah.
That's so true. It's really like you nailed it. Just being more thoughtful about how you introduce yourself and how you respond to the question, what do you do? Even
Mm.
if someone asks you that question, respond as if they just said, how are you spending your time?
Yeah.
How are
Yeah.
you spending your time? What do you do? I'm a senior vice president at a marketing agency. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
I spend my time trying to solve my team's problems. Like, that's what I did as a senior vice president at a marketing agency. I spent my
Yeah.
time trying to solve my team's problems, and it was largely unsuccessful. But I think if I had led with that, it would have been interesting. People would have like enjoyed that because everyone has that problem. you know?
Yeah, yeah, but thanks for framing that. I never thought about it this way, but you really reminded me in the past how I introduced myself, and now I have a very cohesive narrative about myself as content for impact and finance for climate. I can just say
Yeah.
that it's like me. So let's go back to the setback, right? You mentioned
Yeah.
something. The setback set the stage for reinvention. What's one small actionable step someone can take today if they feel stuck in a type of whether it's big or small?
So one thing I like to guide people. It's like a very, very easy way to start working yourself out of a setback or determining whether or not you are in a setback, because sometimes it's not super obvious.
Mhm.
If you do any sort of like journaling practice, right? Get a physical journal, right? Get a beautiful notebook and write maybe not every day, but maybe like 3 times a week, enough so that if you do this for a month or 2 months, you have enough data to work with.
Mhm.
Every day, rate your motivation, rate your energy, and rate what am I energized by and what am I disengaged with.
Mm.
Answer those questions very concretely. What am I energized by? I'm energized by coming on this podcast and talking to Lydia. I'm disengaged with the meeting I have with my boss later, and map the activities, the activities you have on a certain day with what's energizing you and what's disengaging you. And then do it enough so that when you go back, you have a good sample of entries, of journal entries,
Mhm.
and see what was energizing you and what was disengaging you. This can be really revealing. Sometimes you are really surprised by the things that are disengaging you. And also, you have to remember that some days, say you're working on one big project, sometimes that project will energize you, and sometimes you will be so sick of it, you do not want to look at it. And
Yeah.
so, by writing it down every day, you can go back and see the macro patterns. And you can, again, if you have the ability, you can go back and try to sort of rejigger your day so that you're doing more of the things that you're energized by and less of the things that you're disengaged with. It can also be very revealing, like, okay, I think I'm very disengaged with my job overall, and it might be time to look for a new role. You also might find that, wow, I'm really energized by this one small part of my job. Maybe I need to make it a bigger part of my job. And then all of a sudden, you've re-engaged yourself in your work in a way that you did not think was possible, right? Like maybe you're 1 foot out the door, but then you do this exercise and a month later you look back and you're like, wait, I can actually make it work here.
Yeah.
right? And then you try and, then later on, maybe it doesn't work out, but at least you've sort of taken steps to change something,
Yeah,
to adjust something.
so much is self-awareness, right? And then I think if people do that consistently, even if they encounter some type of setback, be they wouldn't be so lost. They would be able to know what it is. I remember you wrote about it in your book. You were sleepwalking into a setback. Maybe it's time to tell the
Yeah.
audience the 4 phases of your setback cycle, so then we can expand from there.
Yeah. And by the way, just to note on that sleepwalking through a setback that you just mentioned, the exercise I just shared with the journal entries of saying what you're energized by and what you're disengaged with and rating your motivation, that's all part of an exercise I have in the book called the alarm clock checklist.
Yeah.
And that exercise is intended to wake you up if you think you might be sleepwalking through a setback. Just to bring that full circle, the reason I designed that was to get
Yes.
the alarm clock to go off or to show you that you're actually still pretty engaged in your work. So that's that. And then to move into the phases of the setback cycle, we do that exercise in the first phase. There are 4 phases. We call them the 4 E's.
Mm-hmm.
It's establish,
Yes.
embrace, explore, and emerge. And what we want to do in the establish phase is wake ourselves up, and because we might need to establish if we're in a setback. Sometimes this phase is very clear, very obvious. You get laid off, you get taken off your accounts when you come back from maternity leave. Those are like clear setbacks, right?
Yeah.
And I think we should also start by defining what a setback is. It's not
Exactly.
just an obstacle, it's not just a challenge. A setback is defined as a reversal in progress. So it's when you're moving forward on a path and you're unexpectedly bumped backwards. So you've made some progress somewhere and then you're sent backwards and you have to reroute or create an entirely new path. And so establish is the phase where you work out whether or not you are in a setback, because sometimes it's just not that obvious, hence the sleepwalking. And so once you establish you're in a setback, you move to phase 2, which is embrace. And this is the hardest phase because this is where we have to kind of sit still and not take action, but we have to do a lot of introspection. We have to gain that self-awareness that you just talked about. But sometimes it takes a lot of work to do that. I was just talking about how important it is to log what's happening and how you're internalizing it, because that data is going to inform your decisions, your path forward, but you have to collect it. You really have to collect it. And there are so many times, even now, where I think I know what I'm going through, or I think I knew how I'm feeling about a certain thing, but then I start journaling it, and it's not like a big journal entry. It's just like, you just kind of like take a
Yes.
couple notes for 5 minutes a day. And then you go back and you're like, wait, what I thought was actually not at all what was happening. So embracing, and I have a lot of exercises in the book that help work you through
Yes.
the embrace phase, because it's a tough one. It's a really tough one. And there's lots of things you can do. This is where I talk about the neuroscience behind setbacks, because we're very conditioned to chase rewards, because that's how our brains work. It's always like pushing us towards the rewards and away from the discomfort. But we kind of have to sit in this discomfort, because the discomfort is where the transformation happens. It's where our brains learn how to do new things and they're rewired. And that's what builds resilience and adaptability and all these things. So that's the embrace phase. It's not the most fun phase, but you have to go through it in order to get to phase 3, which is explore. And this is a great phase. It's really fun. This is where you do exercises like figuring out your superpower. You're probably on that. That might be chapter 8 area.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you figure out what your superpowers are. You talk to friends. You kind of ask them to mirror back to you what you're good at, what makes you unique. It's like a very fun exercise. You turn to your community, you test out new ideas. This is when you like revisit old hobbies that you've put aside. The most cliche example of this is like you take the pottery class after getting laid off because you never made time for that before, but now you have some time. And like it seems silly, but it's actually very rewarding, right? When you
Yes.
are just sitting and focusing on creating something with your hands, something that you haven't given yourself time to do prior to this moment, you'll be surprised at what that reveals. Your brain is focused, you're thinking through things, and that's a really great way to process a setback. So that's the explore phase. It really kind of brings out your creativity and innovation. It's nice. And then the fourth and final phase of the setback cycle is emerge. And this is when we come out of our setback. It's hard sometimes to really like take that final step and take action, right? You make all these plans. You're like, okay, I've explored these options. This is my path forward. I'm pretty clear on what I'm supposed to do. And then you go to do it and you're like, oh, but I'm scared I'm going to fail again. I just went through a setback. I don't want to go through another one. And there's all these obstacles when you get to emerge, but really it is that Phoenix moment. Like you have come through your setback, you are on the other side and you really are ready to step into action. I say if you don't feel ready, just move slowly, right? And even when you establish you're in a setback, this is not a moment to automatically blow up your life. I encourage people to go through the cycle and take as long as you need because this is really important. And the worst thing you could do is barge forward in a way that's thoughtless, that just gets you back into the same space you were in. Right. A lot of people are laid off from one job. They just rush into another job that's very similar to what they were just doing. And it doesn't always serve them.
Yeah,
Exactly. They're leaving it another 6 months later and they're back to where they started. So really take your time, be thoughtful, try to understand what got you here and what you need to get to the next chapter.
Yeah, I just finished the phase 3 here in
Oh, okay. Oh, you are.
and phase 4 is emerge. I'm looking forward to see what's the best Phoenix part of that cycle. But going through all the 4 E's, and you have interviewed a lot of people and talked to many people about the setback cycle. Which phase do people struggle with the most? Is
Embrace.
Embrace. Yeah.
Embrace. Yeah. People struggle with embrace. They just want to fast forward through it. It's painful. You have to sit and be like, why did that person leave this relationship we were in? Why did I mess up that project so badly? And you can get stuck in this spiral of blame and shame, or you're just like totally blaming another person, or you're totally just inflicting shame upon yourself. It's always a combination. It's never one person's fault. It's never totally your fault. It's usually a combination of both, or it's like some external societal factor that no one had any control over. And so I think, taking what you can, learning what you can is one thing, but then, leave it behind.
Yeah. I really like the word yet that you highlighted in the book.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like, how can people practically use this mindset in
the word yet?
Yeah.
So this is part of the growth mindset. It's a concept coined by psychologist Carol Dweck in the early 90s. People use the word growth mindset without actually understanding what it is. And it is the concept that like success is chasing personal growth and adaptability. It's not just chasing quick wins and easy wins. It's just the idea that like we can and should evolve and grow. And if you try bigger things that maybe are a little scary, but they're going to kind of like push you into uncomfortable spaces, you'll be able to really see a better picture of your fullest potential. One of the examples she gives is like professional athletes. Yes, of course, they are born with some natural ability.
Yeah.
But the reason they became professional athletes was because they pushed themselves to grow and learn and practice and adapt, right? You cannot coast on natural ability through everything. That's really the growth mindset. And so what she says in terms of using the word yet is, so say you're a person who is in the corporate world and you want to be an entrepreneur, but you're not one yet. You've never built a business yet.
Yes.
There's the yet. I'm not a business owner yet. I'm not an entrepreneur yet. I don't have any clients yet, but I will, but I can be, but I'm going to be. Do you see the yet, right? So you have to know that like that will come. You just have to build towards it.
I love this phrasing because it's so simple and easy to put on any sentence. Because it's usually, at least for me in the past, I have so many self-doubts. And I've come across so many setback cycles. I know it's just a yet question. But for some of my friends, they would be like, but I don't know how to do this. You can just simply add a yet after it.
Add a yet, because nobody knows how to do it until they do it.
Exactly. Yeah. This is so good. That's probably my favorite tips from the book, like outside of all the other practices that you have. You also mentioned the discomfort in your TED Talk, is that we have to reframe our relationship with discomfort. Like what practices and habits that you recommend to help people lean into that discomfort rather than to avoid it?
That's really the embrace phase,
Mhm.
is processing your discomfort and knowing that if you work through it, you will come out the other side. But if you ignore it, it will come up in ways that are not productive and potentially unhealthy. So when something happens that makes you uncomfortable, again, you kind of have to battle your brain's instinct to chase the rewards and move away from something it sees as uncomfortable, right? It's that biological nature to run away from the bear, run away from the tiger, because you're stressed, you're working through the stress response, and like your body is reacting in a way that like our ancestors would react if they were being chased by a bear. You're not being chased by a bear, right? Maybe you got laid off, maybe you have some really really difficult thing that is happening to you and you need to work through it.
Right.
But you have to ask why your body is responding in this way, so that when this happens again, you have the tools to work through it. The first time you go through a setback, it's very chaotic. But what I learned in my research and in talking to a neuroscientist about this process is when people go through more and more setbacks, they're actually better at recognizing the signs that they're about to go through another, and they're able to course correct more quickly and earlier so that they avoid the next setback. So just know that if you're facing a moment of discomfort, it stinks. It's not fun, but it's going to teach you something, and you have to look at what you're going to learn from it. But during the embrace phase, like in the aftermath of a setback, you're not really ready to learn. You're not really ready to get introspective and get to like the learning part. You're never going to be like, oh, yay, this happened. This is going to be a transformational experience. Like that's just not going to be that's not going to be the reaction. It's going to be, oh, damn it.
Yeah.
I have to deal with this now. But that's the thing. Deal with it. Don't avoid it.
You also said that people should just, if you want to rest, rest.
Yeah.
Don't.
Yes. Don't rush. I think that's the biggest thing with the setback cycle. Don't rush through it.
Hmm.
Don't try to speed your way through it. And I am the setback expert and I still try to speed my way through it. And I have to consciously bring myself back and stop myself from that instinct. It's really hard. That's why I wrote the book, because I want to help people get through it.
Out of all the interviews that you have, so many conversations, what's some kind of like common patterns when they go through this four phases, that if you can name
I just
one?
think that after working through the setback cycle, people came up with their best ideas.
Hmm.
That's what inspired me to write the book. I just noticed that these great ideas came after people went through something generally just unpleasant, something that bumped them backwards. And then that backward, right? If you think of a slingshot, like you have to kind of like pull it backwards before it's propelled forwards. And that's exactly the cycle that every single person went through, which is why I wanted to articulate what was happening. I just think that the aftermath of a setback is when we get our best ideas. It's when we apply creativity, innovation, new approaches to design and intention and thoughtfulness. And even if you don't end up in a place that's dramatically different than where you started out after the setback happened, your perspective probably shifted. And you can apply a totally different mindset. Like someone who didn't get a promotion at work and they felt like that was a setback because it was something that they were working towards. They didn't get the promotion. They weren't laid off, but they didn't get the promotion. Well, maybe they need to reframe their relationship with work, right? Maybe they shouldn't be putting all their energy into it. Maybe they can log off at 5 and go to the pottery class, right? Go on that run, join the running club, join the thing that they were avoiding joining because they didn't want to seem uncommitted to their day job. But if it's like you can stay in the same place and just reframe your relationship to it and reframe your mindset and perspective.
Yeah, and
And
in the example that you just mentioned, I feel like it might not be counterproductive to join the pottery class to take that
no,
one.
it's great. I
Because
always say we should be perpetually in the explore phase, even if we're not going through a setback,
exactly.
because we're always growing, we're always learning. We can always be in that yet moment. Like I'm not, I'm doing the corporate grind right now. I'm not an entrepreneur yet. I'm not selling pottery out of a shop yet, but maybe one day I will be. And that's great. You never know. That's the thing. You never know. And I know everyone thinks that they don't have enough time to explore passions on the side. But the way I wrote my book while holding down a full-time job and being a mother to a toddler
Yes.
was I dedicated 15 minutes a day. That was non-negotiable. And I took that 15 minutes and I made it like really before work started. I made it 8:45 to 9 because I would drop my daughter off and be home by 8:30, 8:35. And between 8:45 and 9 a.m., no one was bothering me really, or I didn't have to respond immediately to anything. And I just gave myself those 15 minutes. And you know what happened in those 15 minutes? 15 minutes turned into 20. 20 minutes turned into 30. And all of a sudden, I spend 6 months dedicating 15 to 20 to 30 minutes a day. I have a book. You know what I mean? Like, you make this time non-negotiable. It's not a big chunk. Everyone can find 15 minutes. And if you have to wake up early to do it or work late at night, I mean, you can find it. It's not easy, right? Again, we're not conditioned to do this. You have to be very intentional about it, but it's possible.
Yeah, it's a good way. I listened to your other podcast. You were talking to this Dr. Drew, I think.
Yeah.
You said that the 20 steps, if you think that something is really big, just break it down. So then the 15
Break it down into 20 steps. Yep. You have a really big goal. You want to, again, like, work your way out of the corporate world and start your own business. What's 20 things you need to do? When I knew that this was my path and I knew that I wanted to invest in building this while I still had a full-time salary, I gave myself one task per month. And so 1 month I formed my LLC and I did all that paperwork. Like, that doesn't take a month, but I gave myself a month.
Yeah.
And then 1 month I focused on building my website. And 1 month I focused on like setting up my invoicing process and like these things. I gave myself more than enough time to tackle the building blocks so that, again, when I got laid off, which I knew was probably inevitable, I had the foundation. Like, I looked around, I was sitting right here when I got laid off. It was virtual. And I stood up from this chair and I looked out the window and I was like, am I going to cry? Where are the tears? And like, this big smile spread across my face because I was like, it's go time. Like, you've been building. Yeah, even though it wasn't on my own terms. And of course I was sad. There's a lot of grief in being laid off, no matter how prepared you are. But I was like, okay, that stinks, but a lot of things just opened up for me. I went full steam ahead. Like you said at the beginning of this interview, it was incredibly liberating.
Yeah. Would you say that that's the one decision you made post setback that you would never have made before? Like the whole process of setting your own agency and your own LLC.
I think that being sidelined after maternity leave accelerated my action plan.
Yeah.
I think that I always had the vision that I would do this one day. And I always, someone reminded me, and I didn't even realize this until it happened. Someone reminded me that I had told them that I wanted to start my own business when my daughter went to kindergarten. Oh. And I think I had said that because I knew that childcare would be less of an expense at that time. And so I was like, I could maybe take more of a financial risk at that time. And what I hadn't realized was the whole time I come back from maternity leave, I'm sidelined. And I kind of realized that, like, there's a clock that's ticking on my agency career right now. Because if this is step one, right? If I'm sidelined and I'm given less responsibility right now, there's only one way this goes, right? And I also saw, like, the inner workings of the business, and they weren't, there were things that weren't done well. And I knew that the state of the business probably was not sustainable as it was being run. And so I was like, okay, I better get a plan. I looked for other jobs. I was like, I better get a new job or I better make a plan. And I did. And I took action. I think that if I came back from maternity leave and I was still, like, spending a lot of my time and energy doing the stuff I had done beforehand, the fire wouldn't have been lit. Even though I had the vision that I one day wanted to do this, but then I came back and I saw the signs and I was like, one day is going to happen. Yeah. I better be ready. Yeah. And I started, and luckily I had time. I wasn't laid off immediately. I mean, that would have been illegal. That would have been a problem, but in years, I think it was like 5 years. Yeah. Cause I was laid off in June and she started kindergarten that fall.
Oh.
And I was like, oh my God, I didn't even, again, this wasn't even on my terms, but this is exactly the timeline I had set out to create. So it was very strange. But it was really interesting. It's funny when, like, things accidentally just work out exactly as you plan them. So
yeah, it's an incredible story, and it makes sense that you wrote the book, The Setback Cycle.
Yeah, it was all work. Everything is more connected than you realize. Like, I was like, here's my marketing career, here's my journalism, my freelance writing, and here's the book I'm working on, and then here's me as a parent. But really, these things were all working together. It's all related.
Yeah. Other than your own experience, what's one story that stand out from your book? Because you have so many stories. If you
So
can just
many. I think my favorite, no, I don't have a favorite. God, I have like politicians, I have advocates, I have event planners who like their industry was totally shattered in the pandemic, bar owners, things like that. A story that really resonates with people is that of Norma Kamali. She's a well-known fashion designer and she was building her business in the 1960s. She got married at a really young age. She had her husband as her business partner. He ran the numbers side of it. And that led to him basically taking a lot of the money that she earned from her hard work and spending it on, going out. There was
yeah.
infidelity and there was, and she knew what was going on, but she kind of didn't know how to get out of it. Like she was tangled up in her marriage and her business partner. Like it was a very complicated situation to get out of. And then one day she was in her workstation and one of the women who her husband was cheating on her with came into her workstation.
Yeah.
And during that conversation, which was obviously an awkward conversation, the ceiling fell down over her workstation. And she was just kind of like, that's it. Like, that is the straw that broke the camel's back. I'm out. She left with like $98 to her name. She found an apartment and she lived in it with like one mattress and nothing else. And she just started asking people for help. Can I borrow a sewing machine? Can I have access to like some materials? She started designing again. She did exactly what she did to build her business the first way, but this time it was on her own. And then she came back with OMO, on my own, Norma
Yeah.
Kamali. And that is the global multi-million, possibly $1 billion business that she runs today. It's her fashion empire. Now she's like one of the most iconic designers of our time, one of the people who boasts like a 50-year career, which is so rare, so unheard of, but leave it, take a setback. What are you going to do with a setback? Like there's also no more powerful motivator than just like revenge.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a good story. I finished that story after this book, right? You're now on your like what's next for you? The Vision Collective and how does that fit into your larger mission?
So Visionaries Collective is my company.
Yeah.
I help people articulate their visions and make their visions come to life. Again, I help leaders, founders, executives with thought leadership, strategic positioning within their industry, and I really help them like make their voice heard through writing op-eds, posting on LinkedIn, or even preparing for speaking engagements, keynotes, and sitting on panels, or even doing podcast interviews. And another part of my business is going into organizations and assisting their marketing team, helping streamline operations, set up new processes, finding efficiencies, and also helping them come up with creative campaigns for things that they're launching. I go into companies and I do brand strategies for them. So it's really just about building my business. And then, of course, there's a piece of my business where I do speaking and professional development workshops at organizations based on the framework that I came up with for the setback cycle. I'm actually speaking at LinkedIn next week and doing
Oh.
a workshop for them about how teams can collaborate after going through a collective workplace setback, like restructuring or, a manager leaving, a colleague leaving, and a reshuffling. And so I do a
Yeah.
lot with workplaces based on the setback cycle.
Yeah, on that, because you talk to so many companies, you work with those organizations, you worked in one many years. The workforce is shifting, right? Now the driving is Gen Zs are entering into the workforce and there's remote work, there's people who are constantly trying new things. What do you see the setback cycle evolve in the new world of work?
I think that a lot of people are afraid for the future of their jobs. I think it was like this when I entered the workforce 20 years ago. There was a time where you could build a linear career at 1, 2, 3, 4 companies and have a great time and then retire. Now, I think the future of work is probably freelance and consulting. There's a lot of contractors that are making up the workforce. And I think people are really scrambling to figure out how AI fits into everything, how that's going to shape the future of their careers. If I did this leading up to this point, how are my skills transferable? How am I going to bring a human element to work to offset, the surge of AI powered jobs, right? And we really have to develop our human skills in a big way. in
Yeah.
order to stay relevant and remain indispensable if you want to build a career in the corporate world. I also think that the future of work is creating portfolio careers, making sure
Yes.
that your income doesn't only come from one place. I was very conscious of that, even when, 99% of my income was coming from my full-time salary. I was already starting to diversify because I knew that that wasn't always guaranteed for my future. And I think that a lot of Gen Z and even like Gen Alpha, like they're really, really taking that to heart, and they know they've seen their their older mentors and managers, and they're like, I don't want that. Like I want more for myself. My younger colleagues and the people that I currently work with and collaborate with, they're really focused on work-life balance, and they're really good at setting those boundaries and saying, I'm going to leave at 5 to go to my running club. I'm so respectful of that. And I try to, embody that myself. I try to log off at 4 every day when I can, but I come from the like Gen X elder millennial mindset of you stay until the work is done. You stay later than your manager stays. Like you
Yeah.
have to prove yourself and like break your back. And I think that's true in some ways, but I also think that we took it too far.
Mm.
And so I think, yes, older workers with a very strong work ethic can certainly stand out. Bringing your human side to work and making yourself indispensable by showing the human element that you need to do your work so that you can combat the jobs that are going to be replaced by AI. And
Yes.
then also just setting those boundaries and making sure that you diversify, that you create a life
Yes.
that your career is part of, but your whole life is not your career. I think that's really the future of work.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the portfolio of life. That's exactly the reason I started this podcast, because I feel like I got out of the traditional 9 to 5 job. All of my friends, they're still in their 9 to 5, no matter how, young or like older they are. They still constantly remind me. They were like, don't you want to just go back for a job? And that's why I have these kind of conversations. One is to give me some comfort that there's people who have done it, and I'm sure like I should be able to do it as well. And also at the same time, share these stories, these advices, tips with people. When you just mentioned about like Gen Zs and Gen Alpha, it might be less of a problem for them to see how to build a portfolio life. But for people like myself, I'm millennial, and people before me, how would you say that they can try to experiment? Like, what's the minimum viable action they can do to tap into that phase to build a portfolio life or different identity other than
I
work?
think dedicate 15 minutes a day to figuring it out. I think that's it. I can't answer that for everyone because it's going to look different for everyone. And if you don't know how to diversify yet or where else you would go, spend 15 minutes a day thinking about it. Do the exercises. The back of the book is a workbook. Do the exercises in the back of the book. Spend 15 minutes a day doing that, because just starting to plan and strategize for your career path, for your life path, for your next chapter is going to open your eyes, and then it's going to end up opening some doors, because the more work you do, you know, I guess the more work you put towards your own personal growth will lead to your professional and full life growth.
Yeah, such a good way. 15 minutes a day. Dedicate
Yeah.
15 minutes a day. Is there anything that you're currently working on that excites you the most?
Just workshops, speaking engagements, and really introducing new people to the setback cycle who haven't yet heard of it or haven't yet worked through it. I know people who even like, they read the book when it came out last year and they're reading it again, or they're listening to the audiobook because now they're in a setback and they need to remind themselves of all the tools. Some
Yeah.
people read it for enjoyment and now they're reading it or doing the workbook at the end to really design their life in a new way. So it it has relevance during one season of your life, and then it may take on a whole other meaning during another season. So,
Hmm. What is
yeah,
the one lesson that you want people to remember from the setback cycle?
you are so much more capable than you realize, and there is so much untapped potential that you can grow into. No matter how old you are, no matter how you've built your career, no matter how you've structured your life, there is more ahead, and it's up to you to go explore it.
That's so good. Let's go through a lightning round. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
If Setbacks had a theme song, what would yours be?
This is me from that movie, The Greatest Showman.
Oh yeah, I love that song.
It's good. It's
Yeah,
a good one.
it's a good one. Yes. If you could write an alternative title for the book, what would it be?
The original title of the book was Visionaries: How Women Saw the Future and Built It. And so that's the name of that's the name of my company. And then I went back and editors gave me this feedback of, that doesn't really mean much. Like, what are they doing to build through their visions? I said, oh, they're coming out of setbacks. So
Gotcha. Yeah, I think it's a more impactful name.
it's more actionable. Yeah.
It's more,
I guess another alternate title could be The Slingshot that pulls you back and then sets you
that
forward.
one is good too. Maybe it can be your next.
Okay, maybe that's a better answer.
Yeah. What's a totally unrelated skill you mastered because of a setback?
A totally unrelated to what?
Unrelated to personal growth, maybe. Just like
Personal growth. I guess while I was writing it and encouraging people to explore their passions, even if it didn't relate to their careers, at that same time, I signed my daughter up for ice skating lessons, and then I would take her ice skating every week. And then there was this open skate, and my husband and I and my daughter would all be like skating and doing this open skate. And I found myself really enjoying it. And so I feel like I love a totally unproductive, useless, but incredibly enjoyable activity that's like just a hobby. And I feel like I spent a lot of time encouraging people to do that in the explore phase. And then all of a sudden, like, I found this fun activity. I'm terrible at ice skating, but I love it. And so I think just reminding myself that I can enjoy certain hobbies like ice skating. We also now have a little piano, and I used to play as a kid and loved it. And so my daughter's taking piano lessons. So basically just take on the hobbies of a 6-year-old.
Yeah. What's your ultimate hype-up song when facing a challenge?
LL Cool J.
Oh,
Mama said knock you out.
that's a good one. That's the worst career advice you've ever received.
The worst career advice I ever received is be humble.
Be humble. The
Don't be
best
humble.
advice?
That's not good advice, because if you're not advocating for yourself, then no one's going to advocate for you. So don't be humble. Brag about yourself.
Yeah, and exactly. I also feel like women well, at least for me, we're way better at being humble than not. So I just need to adjust
Our
to
instinct is to be humble, but I think, frankly, men are more comfortable when we're humble, and they're very uncomfortable when we're advocating for ourselves. However, no one's going to recognize our achievements or our skills if we are not advocating for ourselves. And who better to advocate for you than yourself? And I think that being humble would be nice if we were given the recognition we deserve, but we're not. And so I think don't be humble. Brag.
Yeah.
Don't brag, without backing up your argument as to why you're great. Like, say why you are great. Hey, look, I grew this thing. I did this thing. This thing happened under my leadership. Brag, but show the receipts.
Yeah, exactly. How about the best advice you've ever received?
You're your own best advocate.
Yeah.
Don't worry about what people think. It's so hard to do, but once you let go of that, oh my God, the liberation.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Nobody really cares about other people. That's what
I know.
Yeah. Have you read any books recently that you wanted to recommend? Other than
I just read a book. It's not coming out until April. I got an advance copy, but it's called How to Fall in Love with Questions by Elizabeth Weingarten. It's excellent. Excellent. It talks about the types of questions we ask, why they're important, why they're impactful. So yes.
Great. I will put that on the list. So we have a closing tradition that you answer the question from a previous guest.
Okay.
So the previous guest asked, how would you plan your life if you have the chance to live 200 years or just 50 years? Just how would you plan your life in those two scenarios?
I don't think I would do anything differently. I think just like, don't wait. All right. Don't wait to do the thing you want to do.
Yes, that's a great answer.
250, 100, whatever it is, like tomorrow is not guaranteed no matter what. So just don't wait to do the thing you want to do.
Live at the present.
Yeah.
Can you leave a question for the next guest as well?
What is something that you never realized you were capable of until you tried?
That's a good one. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This was wonderful.
Yeah. So for listeners who wanted to connect with you, where they can find you so that we can?
AmyShoenthal.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram at Amy Show. I've been playing on TikTok lately too at Career Coach Mama. And yeah, if you go to the setbackcycle.com, that has everything you need to know about the book, about booking me to speak. Yeah, and that's the book. And read the book.
Yeah, read the book. Everyone should read the book. I will finish maybe soon.
It's an easy read. It's quick.
Yeah, it's easy and also practical for everyone. Thank you so much for your time, Amy.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Yeah, bye. So that's another episode of Escape 9 to 5. Escape 9 to 5 is my way to help people visualize and see the stories behind those who have changed their life from a traditional 9 to 5 job to a different portfolio life. If you like this video, you might resonate with this video as well. All the links would be in the show notes, and you feel free to check out. If you listen to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and if you like it, don't forget to give us a 5-star review. It really helps the podcast to be discovered by other people. And if you like any specific clips or mantras or any takeaway from this video, please share with us in the comments down below. Share with your friends and family. That really helps the podcast. Thanks for being on this amazing journey. Until next time, I hope this episode gives you a little bit of inspiration, nudge you a little bit to do something on your own or just try something out for the first time ever. We're here with you. We have this whole community and all the guests coming. I'll see you next time.